least, I'm sorry, 5 Eastern Daylight Time, and time zones all around the world. And today we're doing questions and answers about Spiritism. So this is your time to just come on board, ask me any question you would like. If not, I have questions that have been asked by other people. But again, if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the bell, you'll be notified when we have these questions and answer periods. So before I begin, I just want to say Spiritism was codified to us, brought to us and codified by Allan Kardec. The Spirits book, he codified the Spirits books with 1,019 questions. And Allan Kardec was foretold in the New Testament. The New Testament said, I better do it this way so you can read, says, Father, if you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he'll give you another consoler to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him, but you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. That's John chapter 14, verses 15 to 17. And then on verse 26, but the consoler, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and remind you of everything I have said to you. Now, that Spirit of truth is the Spirit who organized all the spirits talking about and sending messages to different mediums throughout the Europe, mostly around the Paris, went in response to the answer for 1,019 questions. And that is all in the Spirits book. Now, I would say, if you're interested in Spiritism, you can also download my book, Spiritism 101, The Third Revelation. It's on my blog, nwspiritism.com. It's PDF. Of course, it's also in Kindle, paperback, and Audible. But it's in PDF, so it costs you nothing. It's also in French for anybody who wants it in French. You can download it for free. And then I would say, read the Spirits book before or after, and then the next one I would really look at is the Gospel according to Spiritism, because I don't know about you, when I was younger and I read the New Testament, there was like many parables and I wasn't sure what they meant. And even now, if I didn't know Spiritism, I would kind of try to have to think through it. But Spiritism gives you the backstory of what you're listening to and what you're reading, I should say. Also, in the Spirits book, if anybody likes to hear it in Audible format, on my site, I also have it in MP3 and also Audible format, which you can download. It's on 2 files. I also have in my playlist on this YouTube channel that you're watching now, it's a playlist, the Spirits book, and I have every chapter. And you can just go through one chapter or another, play those, listen to them, watch them. I just have a picture of the Spirits book and I'm just reading it. So you can listen to it that way also. Okay, let's get to questions and answers. So I don't have any questions yet. Also, I'd like to ask if people are interested in asking me questions and yet showing up on the screen and kind of in being live, let me know, because what I can do is I can put down a link and we can try that. I can put my headphones on and listen to you, and we can actually watch you ask questions. We can have more of a dialogue instead of you typing in questions. So let me know if you'd like to do that, and then let's try for the first time. It might be fun. Okay, let's go through other questions I've had. Okay, so I've answered question 1. Oh, here we have a question right here. So hold on a second, let me just hide this. And according to Spiritism, this is from Joseph, can you tell me if meditation offers any real benefits? I hear a lot about meditation and chakras. And I believe the answer is unequivocally yes. Now, meditation is also a form of prayer because you're thinking positive thoughts. You're also asking for input. You're trying to keep your mind open and ready to be inspired by spirits. And so I would say it absolutely offers benefits. And in fact, you'll see many passages in spiritist literature saying that one should pray and meditate. And in chakras, now in chakras is Spiritism calls them force centers. And so they're almost one for one. I won't even go into what Spiritism calls them, but yeah, if you have chakras, they are the same as what Spiritism says. So absolutely, in fact, you see a lot in the Hindu and Buddhist philosophies that are very parallel with Spiritism. In fact, if you see Hindu and yoga and Buddhist, they the yogis, right? They'll say we're just energy. We're just not energy. I'm sorry. We're light. We're just light. And if you think of as light as being energy, and then you infuse a little bit of intelligence in it, then yes, that's what we are. We are on this construct of the earth, and we are basically uh, energy beings, logical beings with our own characters and personalities. And so when you meditate, you get in touch with, you start connecting with the whole universal database, right? Everything's connected. Now, let me go in chakras for a second. So what Spiritism tells us is that when we start as very primitive spirits, and I don't mean primitive spirits like in a tribesman on some island or something. I mean very primitive logic, encapsulated logic, and we're controlling, like, could be bacteria, a plant, or whatever. And so as we go through eons of reincarnation, incarnation after incarnation, what we're doing is we're learning how to control that physical body, and that therefore as we get experience, we control more and more complex bodies. We go to a small animal or a fish or something like something like that. And so as you're learning to control, you'll learn to control these different areas, like the splenic chakra, the heart chakra. And so this is once you get into this, you really see the genius of the spirit world, because it's pure heuristics. The heuristics is the ability to break down problems so you can solve them. And what they're doing with your paraspirit controlling your body is there are different sections of your body, and you probably have different routines and logic in your paraspirit that knows exactly how to control the throat chakra, the solar plexus chakra, that you've learned over eons of incarnation into more primitive, more animals run by instinct, not free will. And of course, as humans, we have free will. That means we don't run exclusively by instinct. We have free will. And on a planet of regeneration, and we go through these predetermined trials, we have free will to make choices in our attitude and our character during our episodes. But as we go higher and higher in the hierarchy of planets, the next planet that we're going to now is the planet of regeneration, we'll have more of a give and take and decision. Like we're going from high school to college, we will start being able to plan out our lives in consultation, even while we're alive, because we'll have better communication. Now, let me hide this one. Awesome. I can't wait to start seeing in the spirit realm. May take much practice and meditation. True. The other thing I would recommend is that you meditate at the same time. So let's just say you're going to meditate on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and you're going to meditate for 20 minutes or a half hour. Do that on a regular schedule. And you may not feel anything, but then after a couple of weeks, maybe, it may take longer, it may take shorter, that the spirits will know that you're setting up this habit. And your guardian angel will know you're setting up this habit. And then they will be more around you, and they'll also protect you against inferior spirits bothering you while you are meditating. And they'll try and give you good inspirations versus, not so good inspiration. So I would recommend you try to do it on a regular basis. Just like families who are spiritist families, they'll have a God at home meeting. And when Uh, when our kids were here, we would do it, Saturday, let's say, I can't remember, 6 o'clock. And we would, the four of us get around a table. We would put a pitcher of water. We would say a prayer first. And then what we would do is then we would read from the Spirit's book or the Gospel according to Spiritism, or maybe one of the books by Chico Xavier, whatever strikes your fancy. Read something about Spiritism, and then have, what we would do then is we'd have a question and answer. And what we saw our children really like is that we'd read the Spirit's book, and we'd read the question, and we'd say, okay, what do you think is the answer? And then they would kind of try to logic it, reason it out. And they were right more often than not. Uh, and then we would talk about it, what the Spirit's book said. And then at the end of the meeting, we'd end with a prayer. And then what we do is, since we did this on a regular basis, the same time, once a week, the spirits would energize the water, and then we would drink the energized water, which is exactly like a spiritist meeting where you go in there, you say a prayer in a regular spiritist center, and then someone gives a talk for a while, and then you go and you get passes, and they'll give you some energized water. And with energized water, spiritual will do magnetic passes over the water, and you drink it, and it's very healthy for you. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, let me get it. Where was I here? Oh, and also, as I said before, for people joining, if you'd like to join live and be on the screen, let me know. I will put a guest link on, and then you can join. And I'll put my headphones on, and then we can see how this will work. Okay. Actually, where's my, let me get my question back. Hold on a second. Actually, I'm not sure I can do that because my headphones, I'm out of ways to connect my headphones since I've used up all the available ports on the computer. So I'll have to buy a port splitter. Okay. Okay, so one of the questions I get a lot from people contacting me and emails is, how can I learn from past life mistakes if I can't remember my past lives? Well, this is, again, it's a very good question. And I'd ask the same until I really started understanding Spiritism and seeing how genius, I mean, absolute genius they are. So think about this. You've done things wrong in your past lives. And so I'll take myself as an example. I've taken money from people, and I've been in positions of power of taking money. And therefore, in my current life, which happened to me, I need to understand what it's like to have my money, to lose my money, because I thought I had this big pot of money. No one robbed it from me. I just lost it in the stock market. And I didn't think it was foolish, but evidently it was. I felt that emotion of, I lost that money. So, or let's just say you treated your spouse terrible, and then you have a marriage where your spouse treats you terrible, and then you make the commitment. You analyze what's happened. You say, I'm never going to do that to anybody. I'm going to act honorably, even if I'm mad or whatever. I'm not going to be like that other person. Well, those things they're all showing you what you've done in your past life. And in fact, I talk about that in my book. The problem is the solution. And I go in 7 life complications sent to test and teach you. And so you can infer what you've done in your past life via the trials and tribulations you are experiencing in your current life. Now, you think about this blueprint you have, this where you go through these trials. You get married, you have this horrible experience, you separate, or somehow you get a big pot of money and then you lose it. All these are set up, and this is set up so as on a singular instance for each person. And yet now you've got 7 billion people in this planet, and that one person interacts with, must be, by the time you're done, millions of people somehow. Just, how many different degrees of separation, one can hardly tell. So if you think of the computing power it would take for the spirit world to figure out the the trials and tribulations and the blueprint for you with the classes, the sequence of classes you need, and then the sequence of other people intersect, like that spouse or the company like I work for that was bought out and I got a big pot of money, right? All of those things, it's just amazing. And that's why I said you don't really need to remember your past lives. In fact, it's actually better for you. Because you've done some horrible things in your past lives. And that's why when people die and pass over to the spirit world, you don't regain the memory of your past life until you are ready for it. Because as I tell people, is that you will be shocked at the type of person you were, of the things you've done. Now, I'm not going to say 100% of all of us have done terrible things. I'm sure there's are exceptions that people are good, but we've all done some pretty horrible things. That's why, Jesus said, forgive 70 times 70. One of the reasons is that whatever someone's done to us, we've probably done that to somebody else in some past life. And that's why we should forgive. Now, I'm not saying that we should embrace that person and make them our best buddy. Now, you can distance yourself, but don't think about revenge. Don't waste your time on hate. Spend your time, pray for them, hope, or just wish them the best. You don't even need to pray for them if you don't want. But try to think well and think that yes, they did that, but they're an immature spirit and they'll learn. And so that's why it'd be a good idea is to just think of these people who've done what you believe to be terrible things to you. Think of them as actors in a play where they're just playing a part and they're supposed to teach you a certain lesson to help you transform your character. Okay, we get to the next one. We mark this so I know I answered this one. Otherwise, I will forget. Okay. No other questions? So the next question that I get a lot is, how can I know my future? And the answer is, rarely will you be allowed to know your future. Only in certain circumstances where it's going to serve a purpose. And that's for a very good reason. If you were 20 years old and you knew that at 25 you were going to inherit, $10 million, what would you do from 20 to 25? Would you go ahead and finish university? Would you keep working? Would you keep learning and striving and interacting with people? Or would you just do the minimum and relax? I mean, that's not why we're on Earth. We're not on Earth to relax and take a big vacation. We're on Earth to work and learn and keep engaged. Now, the opposite, let's say, you're going to die 2 years from now. Well, again, are you going to keep striving? Because your job is to interact with people. Your job is to work with people. And therefore, if you're going to zone out, you're not doing your job. Now, there are exceptions to this. And I can personally tell you one exception. And people have this in their NDEs. And my wife had an NDE, which she knew her future. And interestingly, as you see a lot of people in NDEs, when they see the future, it's usually after the fact, and then they remember what they were told or what they saw. But in a couple instances, my wife knew things that were going to happen in the future. And those instances really changed my life when these were things that were, you know, not at all. I mean, they were not in the realm of possibility. They were not probable at all. They were at 1 trillionth of a percent that what she could say that she knew what she was talking about. Very specific. And she told me other things that, before earlier in our relationship that I, just fluffed off because they were general and that could be anything. But no, not these. So she was told her future in relationship to my future, and it was the catalyst for me to discover Spiritism. So sometimes that will happen, but most of the time, no. And remember this: for the spirits who were in heaven and incarnated from one of the levels of heaven, most probably you were instrumental in planning your future. You would work with a, a host uh, of spirit mentors, and you would analyze, very, calmly, what you've done wrong in the past, what type of character kind of things you want to improve, maybe primitive urges you had you haven't gotten rid of, you were still a little bit jealous, or you're still a little bit selfish or prideful or whatever, that you wanted to try and rectify on your life on earth. Now, you can ask, well, can't you rectify that in the spirit world? And the answer is yes, you can. And what the spirits say is it usually takes longer, because if you think that think of this: you're in heaven, everything is calm, you're surrounded by positive people, your anxiety level is probably practically nil. You're not given the stimuli to really cause that deep analytical uh, you know retrospective of your life and then make changes to your character and personality. Whereas on earth, you're bombarded by stimuli all the time, and it's in a state of anxiety and stress somewhat already. And so the earth was created to be an efficient place for you to modify your personality and your character. On the earth, it's not important for you to be a genius or accumulate wealth and power. No, the earth is there for you to modify your character and personality and become a higher spiritual person. That's all that's important. It doesn't make a difference if you live in a hut or have 5 yachts. That, material things is nothing for when you go back into heaven. In fact, I was reading this one book where this guy just got into heaven, and he was a very nice religious person. He was met in heaven. He was helped, and then all of a sudden there's all this excitement. He goes, "Oh, so and so is coming. He's finally passing over." And so all these higher spirits that are all coming down to meet him, and he comes, and his spirit mentor was next to him. And he goes, "Well, why are they meeting him?" He goes, "Well, he was, he only worked in workhouses. He's very poor, but he helped others." So the guy came over, and he goes, "Oh, we're so welcome you, and you've done so many great things." And he says, "I don't remember doing any great things." "Well, so and so asked for some food." Well, he goes, "And you gave him a crust of bread." and so it was like, "Well, yeah, I did, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal." And it was just on that where he would help people, but he never thought of himself as helping anybody. He thought of himself as just trying to to get along, right? And to say, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was very humble about it. Another story is the spirit came. He came over, and he was put in heaven. And he was put into this house in one of the lower levels of heaven. And so therefore he was a cobbler. So a cobbler, right, is someone who fixes shoes back in, I think, in England, quite a couple hundred years ago. Barely made ends meet. And so he was in his little bungalow house, and the spirit walked in and goes, "Well," he goes, "how are you doing?" He goes, "I'm doing fine." I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting directly. He goes, what's that book over there? And he says, well, the cobbler says, well, this book, it's not meant for me. It's a book. It's a book about how to bring people from different religions and cultures together in the higher levels of heaven, so they cast off their old prejudices and their preconceived ideas, so they work together. But it's not meant for this level of heaven. He goes, well, who wrote it? He goes, well, I don't know. He goes, look at the book again. And he looked at the book, and his name was there as the author. He goes, no, it's impossible, because he hadn't regained his memory. They'd let him rest for a little while and hadn't really regained his memory of what he was before he was incarnated. He goes, and the High Spirit says, look, you've done a great job on earth. You were a cobbler, and we've watched you. And we know when you made shoes for poor people, your mind wasn't trying to maximize your profit. Your mind was on trying to build those shoes as well as possible, to make them last as long as possible, because you know the people that you were selling those shoes to were so poor. And in fact, when someone had a funeral or problems, you gave what you could. And when you died, you barely had enough money to cover your burial costs. And the cobbler said, oh, yeah, but I'm not worthy of writing this book. He goes, look, you are ahead of a team that you're going to go meet. He goes, no, I can't meet. I can't do that. Yes, you will. So he and the cobbler started walking. And as they were walking from probably one level to another level, his memory started coming back. He started remembering who he was, what he had done. And so the cobbler made some important personality changes. He became so focused on serving and helping others that he didn't think about his own money, his own situation, as dirt poor as he was. And so, again, this is the reason why you don't know your future, because don't worry, the spirit world is going to lead you through these situations in which you will learn or not learn, depending on how open you keep your mind or not open you keep your mind. It's all up to you. And again, I think, and I talk about this book, I talk about this in my book, How to Live Inner Peace Through Spiritism. And one of the things that's really important, and this is something that I didn't do for decades, is try to stay in the moment, at least a portion of your mind. Now, what do I mean by that? So when I was in, a teenager, 20s and 30s, and 40s, really, a lot of 40s, I always looked to the future, and I always thinking. So when I would like walk to work or do something, the people around me were fuzzy, and I was concentrating on my next goal to be successful, all that stuff. But not if someone wanted to interact with me at that moment. I would like look at them and move on, right? And yet we encounter stimuli, we encounter people daily that are sent to help us and guide us and sometimes teach us and inspire us. And when I started really understanding Spiritism, and that I said, okay, I need to, as I walk to work, and before I walked to work, let's say I used to go on the ferry from Bainbridge to Seattle, and I'd walk to our office. When I walked to work, I wouldn't even notice my surroundings. And if I noticed, the poor bums in the street, I'd just like dismiss them out of hand, like, oh, you're worthless. But then I learned is they made poor decisions. They have made extremely poor decisions. And, God bless them. They're going to have to do another life, because the life they had at this one wasn't very effective. In fact, the Spiritists call that parking, right? When you go life after life, you don't really learn anything, you don't improve, you don't grow. I mean, and that's not, I want to go another tangent real quick, people think that as we reincarnate, we slowly get better and better, and it's kind of an upward slope. What really happens is you live life after life, you park, as the Spiritists call it, you're parking. And then in one life is like, the light turns on. It's like, oh, I need to do something. It's like being in your teens and 20s when you're just like this lazy kid who's delusional, and all of a sudden you wake up and you go, oh, there's real life. I need to do something. Same thing. And all of a sudden it's a very high upward slope of becoming a more spiritual person. And so that's what people say really, this is general. Right? I'm not saying anything that is, has to be 100% true. Okay. Let me do one more question. Number 4, what do I do if I'm in a terrible relationship? So no one says, let me first go back to Spirit's book, 1850s, right? 150, 170 years ago now. And remember back then in Europe, divorce was like really hard to get, almost impossible. And Allan Kardec asked him, can people get what do you think of divorce? And the spirits said, the divorce laws are human, right? So it's not, people who are miserable together don't have to stay together. And so therefore they're saying that those were not divine laws, those were human laws. So hence, if you're in a terrible relationship, you can extricate yourself from that relationship, but do it honorably. Don't take everything that other person has. Don't ask for revenge. If you have kids, make sure that you try to be as nice as possible with each other. Don't turn the children against each other, and try to act honorable. If you have to give a little bit more, you give a little bit more. It doesn't mean you have to stay with them. It doesn't mean you have to be bosom friends, but just keep them at arm's length. Don't think bad about them. Try to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope for the best for their future, but know that you're just incompatible. Okay, so I'll do one more question. Like this. Oops, it didn't work. I'll do it this way. There we go. Okay. Now, another question I get from people is, will I ever meet my other half, my soulmate? And the answer is, I don't know. The answer is sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Now, some people may not even have a soulmate in heaven. And that's just the way that they decided, and they may have had one in the past, but no one's married for life in heaven. There's no such thing as formal marriage, right? There's no children. You can't procreate in heaven. And in fact, in heaven, the act of making love is they can do it in the lower zone, but it's not important to you. It's like eating in heaven. When you get higher and higher levels, it's like it's a habit that you just kind of let go because there's more exciting, more fulfilling things to do. So some people are together in heaven and they stay together for maybe thousands or 10,000s or hundreds of thousands of years. And sometimes there's even talk about people co-join and becoming, one. But if you have a soulmate in heaven that you've been married to multiple times, and there's been a lot of this in Spiritist literature. In fact, Geraldino, who gives wonderful lectures, talked about Emmanuel in his books. And the first one is 2,000 years ago, and the next one is 50 years later. And there's other books as they kind of go up in time. And he was talking about this one family. It wasn't Emmanuel's family, but were this husband and wife, and how they were together. And he talked about how the husband and wife were husband and wife in successive lives. So they can be. And before I get, let me get this other question here. Hold on a second. And I must come back to this later. Oops. This is the question. came across Neville Goddard's work where he talks about manifesting anything with our thoughts. Is this really possible? Say the lottery. If we believe in our minds the law of attraction, some call it. So this is where, remember in the New Testament, Jesus said, your prayers will be answered. Now, and your thinking does, positive thoughts do work. Prayer does work. How it works could be different than what you think. Now, and so, yes, I believe in Neville Goddard. Positive work absolutely works, but positive thinking, I should say. But it may not manifest in what you think it will be, and it may not manifest until another life. So say you think that I want to win the lottery, I want to be a multimillionaire. You may not win the lottery, but your next life, you could be born into a very wealthy family. And then you'd have that test of what do you do when you have a lot of wealth? What do you do with it? How do you treat people? So yes, and then you also attract the law, and he called law of attraction where you're thinking things and things will come to you. And that's because the spirit world is seeing your thoughts. Let's talk about prayer for a second. And it's the same thing with thoughts. When you have a prayer, when you really want something and thinking, let's say you're thinking about winning the lottery and you're thinking intensely about winning the lottery, that will come up in the same thing as a form of a prayer will come into the spirit world, and it will be analyzed by spirits. I talk about this in Spirits in the Spirit Universe in my book 2 of how prayers are actually analyzed and acted upon. I'll show you that right here. So they'll look at that and they'll think, well, this person wants to win the lottery. What should we do? And they'll think, what's good for you? What's going to help you grow spiritually? And was that a good test for you? And they may arrange for you to be inspired of the numbers of the lottery because that's a good test for you. Or they may say, I think that would be negative right now. You're not ready for it. Let me give you an example of not ready for it. There was this spirit that haunted this house. And was in the magazine by Allan Kardec. And they wanted the mediums meeting there, so they understand, why is this spirit haunting a house? Well, they brought the spirit in, and then they brought his spirit, his guardian angel, his spirit mentor. And the guy said, no, this is my house where I've lived. I don't even think I'm dead. This is my house. And he wasn't very cooperative and didn't get much information from him. But then this other spirit came. He goes, let me tell you about this guy. He goes, he was immature. He called him a primitive spirit. He was an immature spirit. He'd done pretty well in his last life. And he kept praying, and he wanted to be rich in his next life. In the spirit world, he wanted to be rich. And we said, no, you're not ready to be rich. He goes, no, I want to be rich. I want to be rich. He goes, okay. And he said, look, we let him get his wish because that would teach him a lesson. Well, he became rich and he had multiple houses. But then he became a miser. What he did is he rented rooms in multiple houses, and he lived underneath the stairs in one of the houses. So he wasn't really even ready to know how to use money. So that was one instance. Another instance is this woman I talked to, and she had a near-death experience, affected her greatly, could barely work. And she was praying, and she was kept helping other people, even though she was not in good shape. She was helping veterans with their post-traumatic syndrome. And then she got an opportunity to live in a house for free because she just watched a park. And when I was talking to her, I said, well, that shows you what the spirit world does for you. Because you were in dire straits, you were helping other people, and they arranged this to happen for you. So yes, your prayers and your meditation are answered, but they may be answered in a way you don't know. Let me give you some other examples. I was in a mediums meeting. I was against the wall, not a medium. And this trance medium, the trance medium is the one who the spirit talks through them. And there's a consoler medium, which, and this is in the spiritist medium setting. The consoler medium will talk to the trance medium, to talk to the spirit through the trance medium. And his trance medium said, Zika, Zika, Zika. And the consoler medium said, what do you mean? She goes, I wanted my neighbor to die of Zika, but instead I died. And I still wanted to die of Zika. Which is like, how can you just say that? You're in the spirit lower zone, most probably. So she had meditated, I don't know, meditated, but she had prayed and thought hard that she wanted her neighbor who she hated to die of Zika. What did the spirit world do? So when you have negative prayers, right, you never know. Now, I'll give you one more example. This is from an NDE this woman wrote about. She had had a good life. She made decent money, made good money. She had a husband that, everyone else, she said in my little group, talked about how horrible their husbands were. But my husband was great. I loved him. We were like perfect together. But I wasn't happy. I don't know why I wasn't happy. So I prayed. And I prayed and prayed. He goes, I'm not happy. I want something different. So a little while later, she got into a car accident. Just ruined her back. She couldn't work. She was in terrible shape. And then she said, I yelled at God. He goes, oh, I wanted to be happy. You made me worse. He goes, I want you to fix things. He goes, please help me, God. Well, then she started to feel a little bit better, but not there all the way. And she went out with her husband to a restaurant, and she drank too much, probably because she was trying to drink, and so she could deaden the pain. And as they drove home, she got out of the car, and her husband said, let me help you into the house. He goes, no, right? Because you know how people drinking are. And then she stumbled and hit her head pretty badly on either a sidewalk or a stone. He took her to the hospital. And she said when she got to the hospital, something happened to her. And she said, her husband said, what's going on with you? He goes, everybody wants to come to talk to you. Everybody is attracted to you. And she goes, yeah, before she was like, no one, people wouldn't come to her. But now she could almost like read their minds and read their emotions and empathize with them. And then say things that would make them feel so much better. And her pain went away. And therefore, and then from then on, of course, her new career, not making much money, but she's very happy with her husband, and her life's work was helping other people. But that's how the spirit world answers her prayer. They're much smarter than you or I. You think you want something, right? Like a kid who says, if I just had that toy, I'll never be bored with it. I'll be happy forever. And of course, you buy the kid the toy, and 2 weeks later, they're on to something else. But I mean, so, we have to be truthful about ourselves. So that is, the power of prayer is real, but it's probably hard for us physical humans on earth to see it manifested within a time frame which is comfortable for us, because our time frame is so short, right? I mean, we're immortal beings. We live forever. We'll never die. But in our physical life, a week, a day, or a month, right? They all seem for different people to be forever. So that's why it's hard for us to detect the answers to our prayers. Okay. If there's any other questions, if not, I will again. I just want to remind everybody, please, if you're for free, if you're interested in Spiritism, please download on PDF on my book at Spiritism, nwspiritism.com, the Spiritism 101, the Third Revelation, and then read the Spirit's book. You can just type in Allan Kardec /PDF, and you will get all of his books on PDF. That's what I did. I found all of his books on PDF, and that's how I just devoured them. It was amazing. If you'd like to have a good survey of the spirit realm, the physical realm, what spirits do, I recommend my book, The Spirit Realm. Spiritism has revealed the reality of our existence. And then from there, if you would like to dive deeper, I have a series of 3 books going into much more detail. And it starts with book 1, Heaven and Below, book 1 of Spiritism. And I take what was said to the Reverend G. Vowell, who was an Anglican vicar, and I add all the other information from the Spirits book, Devaldo Franco, Chico Xavier, Yvonne Vieira, Leon Denis, and kind of show what was shown to him by spirits. In most of the spiritist literature, the ones that's in Portuguese, they'll talk about heaven, the lower levels of heaven. But Jiva Owen really, for the first time, what I think, maybe there's other places, but I haven't read it, talked about the higher levels of heaven and the processes and how things work. And so, like, this is, instead of, it makes heaven less fuzzy. I mean, there's still parts you don't know about, of course, right? It's like looking through a keyhole, but it gives you actionable information about heaven, about spirits, uh, about yourself, and how we're guided in my whole series of 3 books. Anyway, I want to say thanks for joining me